Today we are covering Heraclitus, 535 to 475 BC, one of the earliest philosophers who took on a very controversial view in saying that all that exists changes. As this quote says, everything flows, nothing stands still. So change. Change is something that the majority of people do not like. Some people like change, but most people go along with the changes kicking and screaming. Heraclitus tried to bring a little bit of perspective way back when about the nature of reality and the change. Charles Darwin, I'm sure you learned about him in science class. It's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. So in case you don't know the story, the Galapagos Islands in the turtles, or you can go with the... Once there were lots of giraffes, boys and girls. Some had long necks, some had short. The long-necked giraffes, they could reach the leaves. They were well-nourished. They were masculine. These short-necked giraffes, their necks were too small, and even on their little tippy toes, they could not reach the leaves. So they were undernourished, and therefore nobody wanted to have sex with the giraffe with the short neck, and over time, they died out. The key is the idea of change. Change occurs, and it's constant. To make this usable for classroom, it's the need for us to be able to adapt to change, which will determine our success in life, because everything that we know in life will change at one time or another. As I said last year to one student, you have to build a boat because the storm is coming. That storm is the nature of life, which is constant change. So Heraclitus, he introduced the concept of logos. Logos he talked about as being this method by which the universe is governed. It's not random. There's an underlying order or reason. We don't know exactly how it works, but he saw it as like a principle. So if some of you have seen Star Wars, kind of like the Force regulates everything. In Eastern philosophy, when we get to Taoism, Lao Tzu, the Tao regulates everything. It's not saying it's a god, a guy, but rather this order that exists in the universe. We can't possibly understand it. He called it logos, meaning logic. He believed that the universe had this logos, and the main concept of the logos was perpetual, constant change. This is his most famous quote: "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." So if I go into the Connecticut River when I'm 9, and then I go again when I'm 59, it's not the same river, and I'm not the same man. What does this mean? Heraclitus said everything is flux, meaning everything is changing. He taught this process of changing in a time when that was not popular. They would look, ancient Greek philosophers would look at a piece of fruit rotting, and they'd have to have a theory about why that happens. The idea that Heraclitus brought is the river metaphor. Everything always changes. It never remains the same. If you look into the mirror every day of your life, you won't see the aging necessarily day to day, but you definitely will month to month and year to year. Things do not remain the same. Everything is always changing. This is a concept that kids have a hard time getting grips behind because you like it when your relationship or your friendship or whatever it is, your hair, is exactly perfect. But then things are going to get worse or better. That's the nature of life. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. Sometimes it's been said, when one door closes, another one opens. It's tough, though, when that door closes. It's tough when the winds of change blow if it's not doing what we want it to do. But the nature of the beast is we must adapt to change because change is the only thing that is permanent, was something that was taught by Heraclitus. And just like that, Heraclitus said the only thing that's permanent is change, which is a weird thing to get your head around because change is changing. And he's saying, no, perpetual, permanent change. When the idea of our senses is that everything is constant. In other words, you might not see the gradual everyday changes in the river or of you, but it is occurring. And here's an odd concept. Most people lie to themselves to try to make life as orderly as possible and not full of chaos comes from change. Meaning, some people have the same breakfast every day. Maybe you have a banana and an English muffin every day for breakfast. And that routine, and there's nothing wrong with the routine, that routine almost subconsciously calms you down. It brings order. Because now you know what's going to happen next when you get out of bed. You're going to have your same breakfast. Well, in a way, we're almost defeating ourselves because life will be changed. We need to be able, as Alan Watts said, to ride with the wisdom of uncertainty, meaning we don't know what's going to happen next. Most people want to know what's happening next. They need a plan because that plan will allow them to get through the day. But in actuality, the way we're looking at it is completely wrong. Why does change scare people? It's odd because a show of hands usually, as more people are afraid of graduating as are excited to graduate, because for the first time after 12 years, there is no bell that's going to tell you where you have to go next. Whichever step you take after you graduate, whatever direction off that podium, it's the direction you choose, be it workforce, college, etc., etc. Few can accept happiness if it means change. We want the life we have now, only happier. When things are going bad, if I say you want to change, most people would say yeah. But when things get perfect, you ever notice that's when things tend to change the most? I don't know if that's true, but we like it, so we're very aware when things don't go the way we want them to in terms of change. Another way of looking at it, one of my favorite ways from great Jack Kornfield, Buddhist scholar, we're in a river of change, and if we try to hold on, what we end up getting is rope burn. So the example I give in class is most people have had a relationship or a friendship at some point, and you realize something has changed. The person does not feel the same way, they are distant, things aren't the same. You either can hold on to the way it used to be, kicking and screaming, causing yourself rope burn, or you can choose to let go. The letting go is hard, but it's the acceptance sometimes that things move on, the river of change. Another great quote, the path up and down are one and the same. Now what does this mean? The idea of two extremes. Heraclitus said that the world is always in a state of becoming. It's going from one extreme to another. So in other words, I'm moving my hand right and left so you can see it, obviously. That's brilliant. He said there's opposites. And the world is always going back and forth between these opposites. Something that's cold will eventually warm up. Something that's hot will cool off. Wet becomes dry. Dry becomes wet. If you put water on the table, that water will eventually evaporate. And then when humidity comes, that water will eventually appear again. He said life is always moving from these two extremes, from dark to light, the two sides of a coin. These opposites are necessary for life. These pairs of opposites have a harmony to them. The yin-yang, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail, the two parts of life, you cannot have good without bad. You cannot have hot without cold. One without the other loses its meaning. So here's the thing that some people can take from this. There is a constant movement, according to Heraclitus, between opposites. If you're a little more awake or woke, or you're a little more in tune with how the life works, you'll realize that the good thing is only possible after the bad thing. If you've been sick for a long time, when you feel better, it's going to feel that much sweeter. The best sleep you will ever have is after you haven't slept in 2 nights. The best meal you'll ever have, even if it's a grilled cheese sandwich, is when you haven't eaten in 3 days. I don't know why you're not eating, but nonetheless. These interplay. The good only exists because of the bad. Now, this takes on a much more important role than just theoretical. Is it possible to switch up your perception when you look at a negative or bad thing? In other words, something bad just happens. But here's the question. If there was never a cloudy day, would we appreciate sunny days as much? Do you need a real crappy day, a crappy series of events to happen to make you actually appreciate when things are going your way? Logos is this intelligence, according to Heraclitus. We can't understand it. It's the way of life, though. It's the movement between these two extremes which we are going to have to endure. The question is, mentally, how will we approach them? Will we say, woe is me, it's raining? Or we will say, it's raining, which will make me appreciate the sunny days and the flowers that grow. You're probably not having this discussion, but you get the point. Heraclitus said that we'll never be able to understand this. We'll never understand the logos. And therefore, we really don't know as much as we think we know about life. I'm fascinated listening to politicians and doctors tell us about COVID-19 with so much assurance. COVID-19 stands for, it was discovered in 2019. We don't know as much about life as we do. There might be some bizarre things like the Pythagoras talked about, or the solfeggio frequencies. There's a lot of life we might not understand. On a deep level, when you don't get what you want, is that event necessarily good or bad? In other words, you don't get into the college you want. Is that maybe good news and you just don't know down the road? How do we know if the event that happens next is good or bad? Only time will tell. Men are unaware of what they do when they are awake, just as they are forgetful of what they do when they are asleep. Most people obviously sleep at night, but the being asleep while we're awake is really not opening up our eyes. Most people sleepwalk. We go through the motions. We get stuck in our minds in the make-believe world we created, thinking about past events that no longer exist, or thinking about future events that might not exist, rather than living in the very moment that exists right now. Is it possible that experiences, signs, actions are out there, and for some of us, if we're more receptive, we can take something from these events? It's kind of mystical and supernatural, and a lot of people will say, it's bogus, but sometimes maybe there are messages that we can get from life, maybe to put us back on the right track. We're going to watch a film called The Adjustment Bureau, which represents this concept to some degree. A couple more quotes just to wrap it up. To exist is to change is to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly. Change is difficult for most people, especially when you lose your first good friend or your first relationship. Those changes are tough, but those changes lead to the maturation and the development we need as people. And finally, Michael J. Fox. If you don't know who Michael J. Fox was, he was in the Back to the Future films. He actually got Lyme disease and then Parkinson's. He's still alive. He's not really able to actively work. I love this quote, though. My happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance of things, and in inverse proportion to my expectations. Direct proportion means the more you accept the nature of change, the less you will be unhappy. Inverse means the opposite. So the more you have expectations, the less happy you will be. So please write a journal in regards to your opinion on change.